Hello, everyone.
Hi, Adam.
Hey, Adam.
Nice to see you all. I think we're waiting on Amy still. Shannon, you're not running tonight, are you? Right?
I'm not. Amy and I chatted earlier this afternoon, so she should be any minute.
Great. I see a lot of our board members are in the attendees side, which is great, as well as a number of our administrators.
I think Brian Coogan and Jeannie, I'm not sure about Jeannie, I know Brian was planning to log in as well, so we'll give everyone a couple minutes.
Hi, everybody. I'll give it another couple of minutes. Looks like we have a full house. That's great. All right, I was just checking. I know we're expecting some board members to join, just checking to see if most of them are here. Looks like mostly. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Adam, you all set? Okay.
You're good.
Okay, great. So I'll call the meeting to order at 6:03. And first up, we have the approval of the minutes. So I'll take a motion. I know they were posted in Slack. So I'll take a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll make a motion.
Victoria made a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second from Stephanie. Any discussion of the minutes? And if we can use our hand raise function tonight, that would be great, because there's a lot of folks and I can't see everybody on my screen. All right, oh, Stephanie has a question. Go ahead, Stephanie. Oh, no, you're good? Okay. Okay, so if there's no questions, all those in favor of passing the minutes, you can just raise your hand. All right, looks like it passes unanimously unless there's any abstentions. Okay, great. Okay, next up, we'll do the subcommittee's report out, public relations.
Amy, real quick before we do that, we had amended minutes. I think there was an amendment made to the minutes. Danae posted those in Slack.
Oh, okay.
So
Great.
I don't know if we need to also approve those. Those were the minutes from the last meeting.
So,
2 meetings ago, I guess, that we looked at last meeting and had some amendments to.
okay. So was that the meeting that you chaired?
No, that was the last meeting, and the amendment was regarding the dollar amount.
Oh, right. Yeah, so she did
Yep.
change that. Yep. Thank you for reminding me. So, yeah, so I guess I'll take a motion to approve of the previous meeting's minutes as amended.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Stephanie. The first, is there a second? Second by Tom. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye, raise your hand. Great, thank you. Thanks for reminding me, Shannon. Okay, so subcommittee report out, and I'll turn it to Shannon Gascoigne for the Public Relations Subcommittee.
Thanks, Amy. Hi, everyone. We don't have any updates beyond the last time we all met, which feels like it was not that long ago. We shared the draft of the website, and we mentioned at that time we were just sort of in a holding pattern, basically waiting on this meeting to happen and an opportunity for this group to come together on a recommendation, and then we'll go live with it. So still in that same place.
Okay, great. Thank you. Victoria, did you have anything on 2.0 to report out? I know that you're going to need some more time to dive into some of the information that came back to you, but anything at this point just to give us a brief update?
Yep. So the Sohegan 2.0 subcommittee has received the cost estimates from LaValle Brenzinger, and Mike Berry, our principal at Sohegan, has been able to weigh in on the different priorities over there, and we will be meeting in the next week or two, and then we'll be ready to present something to Hvac for the October 15th meeting.
Okay, great. That's helpful. Any questions for Shannon or Victoria before we move on? Okay. I'm moving along quickly because I know we have a lot to go over with the cost estimates. So any updates from the Amherst School Board? I guess, first of all, I want to welcome the board members who are not on the committee, who are in attendance tonight. So thank you very much for attending and getting a firsthand look at the cost estimates as we are having them presented to us as well. So thank you. And thank you also to Sohegan board members who are joining us. So any quick board updates from Amherst, either Tom or Ellen?
Now, we haven't met since our last meeting, so we actually meet tomorrow night. So the one thing I will add is that we did get approval from the state to use our unreserved fund balance of 1.5 million. So that was officially approved, which means that we won't have to go to taxpayers to ask for anything on a special ballot. Unfortunately, it also means we won't be able to return that money, but there will be no second ask to be able to fund everything for PPE, cleaning, and all the stuff for COVID to be able to open up schools this year like we have so far. So it's a positive and a negative, I guess, in a certain way, but it's certainly a positive that it was approved.
Yep, absolutely. I know Sohegan's in the same boat. Not to steal your thunder, Pim, but if you had any other updates for Sohegan.
Nope, I think kind of the same as what Tom said. We haven't met since our last Hvac meeting, so same traffic. Okay,
great. All right, so we got through all that, and we can get to the meat of the meeting. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lance and Ann to talk about the two cost estimates that were put into our Slack channel just a day or so ago. So Lance, take it away.
Great, thank you. So we did post estimates up to the Slack channel that we'll be sharing tonight. I'm also joined tonight by James Brennan with Harvey Construction. We engaged Harvey Construction as our construction estimator. Harvey Construction is also a construction manager in the area and has a lot of experience doing schools. So we worked with them to not only for the but also to provide.
Lance, you're Sorry, you're breaking up a
and
little
an
bit.
estimate of- Okay. Can you hear me well enough just to go slow?
That's better.
All right. So I don't know how much you caught, but we are joined by Hvac Construction tonight, who did the estimates, and I will move on to present those. James Brennan is with us from Hvac Construction, and he can talk through some of the assumptions and some of the work that went into those estimates. I would note that they are a first pass estimate and can continue to be refined by this group, as well as with Roger Preston to look at some of the more detailed systems that we're looking at for the buildings. So with that, I'm going to share my screen. Everybody see that okay? So just as a reminder, this is the general scope of the project at Clark Wilkins School that we had looked at the last meeting. What we decided was that a new school, grades P through 5, would be appropriate on the site of the Wilkins School. That would give us the ability to replace the ball field in the front, as well as place our septic system there and be able to raise the Wilkins School. We worked through some phasing with Hvac Construction. The thought was that we could build the majority of this building, move, with the exception of the main entrance, raise the school, move the kids over, and then finish off the site work as the last phase. I'm going to hop right over to the estimates. So we've done a detailed estimate that does make a fair amount of assumptions and has a lot of allowances in it, including permitting fees, including insurance fees, how much we plan on spending for survey data, wetland studies, hazardous materials. We did do allowances for all engineering fees. Again, all set as allowances, just as kind of standard for a project of this size. We did include a commissioning agent for the owner, construction, test, and inspection, and an OPM for the owner or clerk of the works, as well as a furnishings budget, which I think this committee could continue to refine. The furnishings budget, we just carried a 6% flat cost of construction. That places you at about $3.5 million in furniture. That can be refined with this committee to refine how much furniture would we need. Are we going all new, or is that not going to be all new? That 6% budget usually allows us to do essentially all new furnishings in all classrooms. Overall, Harvey will talk about their number, but the number for the new building was broken into 3 categories. General conditions, that's essentially the cost to run the job. Harvey had estimated this project to take about 34 months of construction. Site work and utilities, that's about $4.6 million. And the new building, which is about $51 million, for a total construction value of about $58 million. That includes, if you add all the soft costs and the hard costs together, including an owner's contingency right now carried at 10%, which we're hoping not to spend, obviously. We're at about a $73 million project at this point in the process. I can come back to those categories in a moment. And I'm going to turn it over to James to talk a little bit about some of the assumptions that went in the details that are in the cover letter for this estimate.
Thanks, Lance. Yeah, so basically dealing with a new school, it's a little bit easier to kind of conceptually put an estimate together, and Harvey tries to, especially the first estimate, is to put as much detail and line item into the estimate so that we can at least, so that you guys can at least know what is in the project. And then we try to work with, LaValle and anyone else to kind of to make sure that our assumptions are correct on what we have in the estimates. So, I mean, we can go line by line if you want to, but like Lance said, it's 34 months. We can build the majority of the school, and then we'll have to come back and demo the existing school and finish off the admin area.
So Within the estimate, we do have full detail. I do not know if anybody on the committee wants to go line by line in looking at where money is being spent, but it is broken down by trade. Right now they are estimates. These are not bids. They're just simply estimates based on Harvey's knowledge, Harvey's experience, and our experience, as well as some of their subcontractors' input. So are there, right off the bat, are there questions on the overall estimate?
Yeah, Lance, I'll jump in right from the beginning. So included, there's 15% worth of contingency on the CM side, plus another 10% on the owner side. How, and I understand as a first pass, you're going to be very conservative, but when you've looked back over your past projects, how far off have you been from this level of construction estimating to final project cost? And how much, and I'm trying to gauge your confidence level in the amount of contingency built into this project so far.
Sure. The contingency is high. I believe between Harvey, we could really, if we, over the next couple months, we could really refine that down to between the two of 15%. So drop it another 10%. Ultimately, we
Lance, your audio is terrible.
Post bond, we do have some room to refine this further.
Lance, your audio is real bad.
Lance, I wonder if maybe you could just call into the Zoom meeting. That way we could hear what you're saying, because you're really breaking up. We're able to hear maybe every other word at most. And I think this is pretty important. Is there a call-in number, Adam, that he could use? So is he coming?
Yeah, it should be in the email he got for his.
It probably was in the email, yeah. So maybe you could call in from your phone, Lance, and then your phone service might be better than the internet service. And in the interim,
calling in now.
That's great, thank you. And in the interim, James, if you wanted to pick up where Lance left off, if you can sort that out, where that was, and talk about contingencies, because it's a really great question that Adam brings up.
Yeah, so typically on conceptual projects or pricing, we kind of like to try to carry at least 10% contingency for between CM contingency and design contingency, more on the design side. And it kind of helps make sure that as LBA goes through the process of design, things that we didn't think about, things that you didn't think about, get absorbed with the design contingency. Right now, since this project is slated to not be constructed until 2022, we're usually right now trying to carry about a 5% contingency, escalation contingency for every year. So that's why you see a total, I guess, if that's what you're calling the 15% contingency, we are seeing about a 5% every year so far.
So you're saying of the 15, 5 is for escalation, 5 is for the CM, and 5 is for the owner. For
right now we have 6 for the design and 4 for the CM, but yes.
Gotcha. Thank you for clarifying.
The issue with that, of course, and for those who are listening to this and not really sure what I'm talking about. So just as an example, if they have, just a very specific number in there of foundation subcontractor, $382,000. On top of that $382,000 is another $100,000 in contingency that we're carrying in case prices are missed or costs are off. And so the result of that is it's quite a big increase in the number we're looking at now. I'm trying to understand how conservative they're being, because it's what they can't do, what we can't do is give a number that's in the public realm that's too low right now. That doesn't work. When we come back later and say, oh, we didn't ask for enough money. But it's a 25% in contingency is just a heck of a lot. So that's why I'm asking the question.
I don't know if Lance is back on, but I hate to call it a napkin sketch, but we are making a lot of assumptions, and we try to quantify as much as we can and make sure that the actual numbers, the current numbers for the quantified items are in the estimate. But at this point, we do feel comfortable, or we would prefer, at least a 10% contingency for design and CM, and then you need an escalation. We're 2 years out before this even gets started. So I don't know if that answers your question.
It does. Thank you.
Other reactions for Lance or James or Ann? John?
I would like to question the time frame. What are the time drivers to make it 35 months? And what is the allocation for the demolition of the old school? What time frame is that? Is there a difference, or is it combined? In other words, I'm trying to get a completion for the actual new site.
Yeah, so the complete project time frame is 34 months. So that includes demoing the existing building and finishing the site. We worked through with our general super to figure out. We've done, most recently we've done a bunch of projects at this scale, and 30 to 34 months is basically where it was falling into. So to try to shrink it. At this point, we're not comfortable shrinking the schedule right now.
Okay.
What's the drivers of the comfort level of shrinking the timeline? Is it just accelerating costs, more demand, or you have to do things in sequential order that, depending on the timing and sequencing of all of those activities, that's the timeline? Is that what the drivers are? I mean, if you wanted to pay for something to be built in 3 weeks, you could. You just have to pay a ton of money.
Yeah, Lance has told me in the past, you 3 things: fast, well, or quickly, and you can pick 2 of those 3.
Did someone have a question?
Well, from my experience, I know that we can still build the buildings fast and still have a very good building. I've proven that with Sohegan High School. So that's why I asked the question. Is it time strain because of deliveries, because of 19, or because of other projects that you have scheduled to do?
So John, I really appreciate that question. I think that the schedule that Harvey puts together it maybe takes into consideration COVID-19. Is that what you're getting at? But it does not take into consideration the fact that we may be busy with other projects. I think it's all about the site that is selected and the kind of amount of work that has to go into getting ready for construction, and then the process and the phasing of construction. James, I don't want to speak for you, so if you want to jump in and clarify that for John, I think that'd be great.
No, I think you actually touched on it pretty well. Yeah, no, this doesn't factor in anything with COVID or 2000, or even, when Sohegan was built, that was many years ago. So things are a little bit different now. And it's not because we, again, like she said, time constraints on other projects that we have going on. It's a 3-story building. There's just sequencing that has to be done to make sure that everything's complete.
Yeah,
Lance?
This is Lance. Can you guys hear me now okay?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I saw the 34 months construction based on similar projects that LaValle Brensinger has completed. That doesn't seem out of this world for $74 million worth of construction, or actually, I'm sorry, $52 million worth of construction to take really 2.5 years. Seems about average. An accelerated schedule might be possible, but that would have to be investigated further, and what really would come down to the cost impacts of that. We do have a good labor pool in this area, and I think Harvey is, larger firms like Harvey or the others that do $50 million plus projects can draw from a pretty large pool there. But I wouldn't say that we're going to cut that timeline in half without heavily increasing costs.
Well, I was not looking for cutting in half. I was looking for more like 28 months.
John, I think 28 months might be doable. It would just, we would want to be able to phase that out a little bit in more detail.
Okay.
This project in particular, because it's a new construction project, I think we can be a little bit more flexible on that schedule. The middle school project, which we'll move to next, I think has a pretty rigorous phasing plan that Harvey has put together for us that is really the driver between how many months of construction on that one. But this one, new construction, if 28 months was the window we really wanted to hit, I'm sure that we can work with Harvey to figure out a way to do that.
James, I have a question. When you mentioned a structure like this, particularly one that's 3 stories, from an engineering and development perspective, is having 3 stories a more complex or costly dwelling to construct versus having just a 2-story dwelling?
To be honest, 3 stories actually works pretty well because you can just run all the mechanicals up and down versus going wider. And yeah, no, I mean, this size of a school, the square foot, if you were to try to put that on a 2-story, now you're looking at a different site completely to fit it.
Is there a cost differential between the 2, though?
I would say yes, because you're going to be taking more of a square foot base if you're doing 2 stories versus 3 stories.
Gotcha. That's helpful. Thank you, James.
Victoria, I see your hand up. Thank you.
So my question is, when we're talking about when we are building the building, if it's 2022 build and we're going to vote possibly in March of 2021, when do we begin? Or are we considering that this might go 2021 and 2022 and then we begin, or what the process is?
So we did put a little schedule together on our cover sheet. Basically, the hope is bond vote 2021. The LBA and their engineers could put together a early site and foundation package for that we could bid out in January, so that we're breaking ground in basically March or April of 2022, and then the rest of the documents would be out for bid in March, so it can kind of roll in streamline it. So the hope would if we could get an early site package to on the street for bidders in early 2022, break ground as soon as spring.
So with that type of timeline, with that type of timeline, that's 2022, 2023, 2024, we're looking at fall of 2025?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
I think there's also some advantage to looking at when is the optimal bid period. And if we can bid that project out, as James had said, in those winter months when bidding tends to be most aggressive, then we can save some money on that. So I think it's worth considering the various packages and ensuring that we have enough bid window to get the best price for taxpayer dollars.
Other questions or reactions from folks? I know it's a lot of money, I'll say.
Yeah, I mean, just from a PR standpoint, I work with the PR group a lot, and would love to hear your reaction. Is there sticker shock? Are you surprised?
Yeah, I'll jump in, Anne. Thanks.
Thanks, Shannon.
Yeah, I mean, there is sticker shock. That being said, this is my first time being involved with, a school building. So I guess my first reaction was like, oh my goodness. Then my next reaction is, wow, fall of 2025. It's 2020 now, and I know the state we're in terms of needing the space, and I'm watching, houses in Amherst they're being turned over like crazy. Families are moving here, so I know we can't rush it, and that's an additional cost, and things take time. But so I have a lot of mixed feelings about it, I guess. Sticker shock is one of them, and then just concern for for how we can get this done to solve the challenges and the problems that we have with our existing buildings.
I mean, from a PR perspective, had we done it 5 years ago, it would have been cheaper. If we do it 5 years from now, it's going to be more expensive, right? So either way, you're going to pay for it. or you're going to put children through a school system that doesn't appear to be adequate to the living standard of the residents of the town. So we're in a conundrum. We have to pay for it one way or the other, or we have to degrade, the educational system through the facilities that we have, which is ultimately going to hit, property value in town. So people have to come to terms with that. We're also in a unique period where if you talk from a financing perspective, you got some of the cheapest debt you're ever going to see. So if you're going to spend money, this is kind of a good time to do it. And we're going to just disperse that over the next 20 or 30 years. I mean, this is kind of like a unique situation. It sucks to spend $75, $100 million for a bunch of schools. It's terrible, right? But if you're going to spend that much money, do it when you have the cheapest rates possible, because we're going to spend it at some point in time, or the town's just going to collapse from the infrastructure for the schools. So I purposely picked my background for this.
Thanks, Brian. So yeah, I just want to remind everyone to use the hand raising function.
I'm not very good at that, Amy. I'm sorry.
Okay, I understand. Thank you. I believe Stephanie, your hand was up next.
Yeah, so I mean, I know buildings cost a lot, and I think to me, part of this, there is a sticker shock because it's not just this building, it's the cost of AMS, and we haven't even discussed Sohegan 2.0, although we did get some draft information. And what I'm concerned about is the overall tax base. Are we going to get the support, not just for this school, but for, for everything? We're going to start here. I'm just wondering, is everything in here like the cream of the crop, top of line, everything? And I know it's an estimate, so there's no details, but I guess my thought is, I don't want to reduce quality to a point of a cheap building or cheap things, but I think we need to take into account we may not be able to afford top of the line of everything, and we just need to consider that because we have 3 buildings we have to work on.
Yeah, can I jump in there and Amy, if it's all right, I'd like to ask from both LaValle and from Harvey, is this VCT and kind of the low end materials and wall sections that aren't have a lot of insulation, or is this brick and block high end mechanicals with the top of the line sort of things? Like where did you go in terms of low, middle, or high in terms of materials and mechanicals in particular?
So this is Lance. With the mechanical systems, we have the full detailed mechanical systems that tend to be top of the line here. And based on recent COVID, we did want to keep the air changes per hour up at the levels that are being recommended now. They've actually been recommended for years, but now everybody's really paying attention to, should we have 6 air changes an hour? And the answer for some time has been yes, and now everybody's kind of realizing they're behind. It does have dehumidification, so that it does create a comfortable environment. It didn't go so far as to fully air condition the buildings. We didn't go to quite that extent. What we did is what we'd consider top of the line for schools, which is dehumidification and air conditioning where there are computer intensive areas and where there are summer positions. So they're good mechanical systems. They are, I think, appropriate, and they are energy efficient. Of course, you can cut those. You could reduce maybe 5–10% on the mechanical systems, but you would be reducing quality and probably decreasing your energy efficiency to do that. So I wouldn't recommend that be the area that you look if you want to save money. And that's not the area that I would recommend any school district to save money. As far as other finishes in the building, we did durable construction. So we did brick exteriors, we did block interiors, and we did insulation that would exceed the energy code by about 20 to 30%. We didn't go crazy with it. It is not a net zero building, but it is an efficient building that would be appropriate for a school. It's a 50-year lifetime building, a 50-year building that we want it to be energy efficient. As far as interior materials go, we did go with what we've been doing in most schools now that are green materials, meaning that they have a long, good life cycle to them. The flooring is a wax-free vinyl tile or a marmoleum type product. That means that you don't have to constantly wax it and strip it, and it doesn't increase maintenance costs for the district. It has a good 30-year life cycle cost point to it, but but it is more expensive than your typical VCT that people have put down in schools because it's very cheap to lay down. It's just expensive to maintain. This level of detail, I would suggest, it's in all the lines for Harvey Construction, and if there was a subcommittee that wanted to go line by line, I'm happy to make those assumptions. But essentially what we've done is a very durable building. There is no Italian marble. There is no extravagance, but there is durability, and there is high-grade materials that are appropriate for a building that's meant to last a lifetime.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go to Ellen. I believe you were next.
Thanks, Amy. I want to repeat, actually, Brian and Shannon's, I'm a little disappointed in the timeline. I agree with Shannon that I think because of the number of families moving in with elementary or preschool age children, I think we're going to see some issues with numbers soon. I don't know if there's a fast track possibility. I know the conversation was already kind of touched upon, but I'm a little disappointed because I guess I thought, maybe we discussed at one point, that if we passed it in March, we could break ground in the summer. So that doesn't sound like a possibility. I also we've never discussed this with this 3-story building, and as John shared with us, the only 3-story building in the town of Amherst. Does anybody anticipate some backlash from the Historical Society, the village residents, that could potentially hold this up? I would hate to see a group of people who are not pleased with the plan. As we've seen in the past, this can happen in Amherst, come out and really, fight against it. So I'd love that to be answered as well. And I'm not sure who could answer that question. I'd also really, we're talking about big numbers here, but I think it's probably really important to very quickly after this meeting have those numbers broken down for what a typical taxpayer, if we do it average house or whatever we usually do it by, to get that information out very quickly, Adam, even potentially for our school board meeting tomorrow night. These are big numbers to swallow and look at. It reminds me of college tuition. But then when you break it down, it kind of feels better. And that's from a person who is about to pay their last college tuition payment. So, so I think that would be really helpful, to talk about this grandiose number. I think gets lost in the shuffle. What's it really going to cost my family? What's it really going to cost the people, who have homes on the flume? What's the real breakdown going to be? And I think that if we were going to get nitpicky, I think we could all agree that we could live with the current furniture for a couple of years at $3 million.
So Alan, I'll just answer, I can't answer the potential for issues with a 3-story building. We did ask several questions at the last meeting about that because it was raised as this would be an anomaly in the town. I think, frankly, the cost savings argument would win in my view, but I'm sure we certainly should have a conversation about it. I will say Adam and I did meet last week, and he's developed a potential model for us to look at over the long term. And also as part of that, we did exactly what you are asking, and we're able to predict what the tax impact would be on an average family home based on the cost of the project. So our work will be to decide what we want to do and when, and have that discussion, and then have an understanding of what that would be for a taxpayer.
Thanks, Amy. So, I think I don't speak for everybody. I can speak for myself. I'm not prepared to make any decisions until I see that breakdown.
Oh yeah, no, I don't. I think we're a little ways away from any decisions. It was just to develop a model so that we could really plug and play and understand. Oh, and here we go. Adam's sharing the model.
And Amy, can we just clarify real quick for the Hvac committee, kind of our timeline? So we're listening to this presentation tonight. We'll still have an opportunity to digest it. We have another meeting scheduled where we can hash this out as a committee, get our recommendation made, begin working on our presentation for the board. Is that sort of our sequence of events?
So
like we're not making a decision tonight. We have to absorb what we're.
Oh gosh, no. I hope nobody thought that. So yeah, no, we have, we are on the schedule for the Sohegan board meeting at the end of October on the 26th, and we're still working on a date for the Amherst school board meeting. And I need to work with the chair on that, but I'm hoping that perhaps we can tag on to the SAU board meeting. That's on the 29th, but we don't have that worked out yet, because I think we're going to need at least this month to digest not only this proposal, but the AMS proposal, and then whatever we're thinking about for Sohegan. So we have a lot of work to do this month.
And then just to touch real quick on Ellen's comment, and not to talk out of turn for too long, but regarding the 3-story building, we haven't reached the phase where we're talking specifics, and we tried to kind of go there at the last meeting, and they're like, oh, well, you know, it's further down the road. But I'm wondering if some of the things that we'll be talking about once we get further along are things like, you know, does the building fit in with the integrity of the historical district? Like, what can we do to make the building look, you know, kind of like it fits, even though it's a 3-story building? And maybe Lance can, you know, lightly touch on that tonight. But I would think maybe there are some things we can do that make it work for the village, even though it is a taller building.
Absolutely. So the 3-story building, the way this is set on the site, the tallest part of the building is going to be backed up against the woods and actually a hill that is nearly as tall as the building being proposed. I don't believe this building, when you drive down the street, is going to look monstrous by any means. I think the site's going to fit it well. I think there's a lot we can do at the main entrance to really break the scale down. I mean, remembering that the students that are entering here are preschool through 5th grade. We want a, you know, small human scale. And I think through design, we can make this building feel like a very small, you know, intimate, accepting place for students and for parents. You know, breaking down a 3-story building, I don't believe is difficult. And I think we have a site that allows us to do it quite well. I am confident that the building will not, by any means, feel like a mill building that's just massive when you drive up to it. We're also approaching the smallest side to it. You know, you're not looking at the whole length of it. You're actually looking at the smallest side. And I think we can get it to fit into Amherst quite well.
Thank you, Lance. I'm going to move along with some folks who have their hands raised. I think, Victoria, you are next, unless that was from before.
Nope, it's not. So I agree with everybody who's talked, right? I thought this was going to move along a little quicker, sticker shock, make sure that it fits in the village, all of those questions. But what I'm hearing, and what I don't want to have this meeting turn into, is defeat. And I feel like this committee knows why we're talking about new buildings or renovations. We don't have space for our students. Right now we do because of COVID, right? So we're able to have some kids home who have chosen to be at home, but we can't forget that if that weren't happening right now, we would be running out of space. I think it's just, when I'm watching everyone's faces, I think when Ann mentioned earlier, you know, PR committee, how are you guys feeling? I think everybody's sort of a little bit defeated, and it's not like we haven't spent all of our time for no reason. At least I haven't. My kids are in 5th and 6th grade. They won't see a new Clark Wilkins, but like Ellen said, all these families who are moving in, all these people who live in town who have younger children or who will be here in 10 years, they'll need somewhere for their children to go to school. That's the reason that we're here. And that's the reason that we're gonna be making some type of recommendation to send to the school board. So I just wanna make sure that the school board knows that what we're doing is purposeful and it's, you know, important. We haven't been wasting our time while COVID is happening on the other side of the world. We've just been a committee who is focused on this part while we're also focused on everything else. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. Wise words. Tom, I had you next.
Yeah, so I just have 2 things. Number one, I think sticker shock is certainly beyond the word. And as Stephanie mentioned, she stole my thunder on this one, which I'm glad she thought of it.
was that this is not the only project we're trying to do. So I think that we're completely insane if we try to put more than one of these on the ballot in 1 year at a time. But just between this and what we'll see with the middle school, we're talking 9 figures, which is a huge number, and that does not even include what we have for the high school. So I'll say that the second point is that this is not the only budgetary consideration with this. Is Adam shared that photo that we saw. It's up to $1,000 a year for the average size house. That does not include the extra teachers we need. It does not include the extra staffing that you need. So there's that consideration on the budget as well. So you're adding to that 73 million with staffing that'll be here full time. And then the last thing, I think we do have to be open to reconfigurations with design. Do we need to have 9 classrooms at 18 or 20 kids apiece? I think we have to be cautious of how small we go with the class sizes, and then how much flexibility we have moving from different areas of the school too. Not that we have to be as makeshift as we are now. I think it's smart to build it for the future, but our enrollment numbers that we've seen from the Mr. Frady study last year, or I should say it was this spring, do not indicate where we'll be, we would need necessarily 9 classes at each grade. And that takes us all the way through the 2025 school year. So I don't know that we're growing as fast as 9 or 10 grades, 9 or 10 classes per grade would indicate. Certainly growing, but I don't know that it's that fast, and I don't know that it will be that fast if some of these housing projects don't get developed. So those are the 2 things that I wanted to get out, and then the one that I thought, we have to be open to redesign possibilities too. I think to bring even 5 or 10% cost into it is still a significant number.
Thanks, Tom. Roger.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. I just wanted to talk about, I really want to touch upon what the people before me touched upon. And I really feel that that everyone's done a lot of hard work on this, and this is great, and it's a wonderful start. But really for us, as far as Lance mentioned, just subcommittees about just going into the level of detail. Tom mentioned about just redesign, looking at it in that way. As I'm looking at the numbers here, we have just line items for skylights that add up to about $1 million. Skylights are wonderful, but really looking at the building and talking it through with maybe a subcommittee and Lance and figuring out, as we take that away, what does the building look like? If we keep that on, what does the building look like? As we go into lockers, I mean, again, maybe this has gone over, but as we dive deeper into it, just looking at, we have 2-tier lockers in here for $140,000. This is pre-K through 5th grade. Do we need lockers? Maybe we do, maybe we don't, but I just feel like those are discussions that we should have to really get the detail. Obviously, we don't want to cut ourselves short, but I feel that there's items in here that we can discuss as committees, subcommittees, and administration to feel, do we need that? Is it appropriate in the project? Ellen mentioned, can we get away with using some of the furniture? I know at my previous district, we did purchase some, but we were able to reuse some as well, going through finding the furniture that we felt was suitable to go into a new building. I really just feel that it's about the detail that Lance has provided here. For instance, another item is hand dryers. Do we want electric hand dryers or dryers? That's a $45,000 cost, but through our custodial company, we get free paper towel dispensers, and we carry that in our operating budget. It's a lot of hard work that's gone in here. We're seeing these numbers to begin. It's a great start for us, but I really feel that we need to dive into this a little bit more and just have a little bit further discussions.
Thanks, Roger. I always appreciate the sharpening the pencil theory. It works well. Christine, I had you next.
I just wanted to piggyback on what Victoria said. My kids won't use any new facilities in the district if we move ahead with this project. But when we started going to school and I started going into our schools and seeing the conditions and getting involved in this cause, I thought, why didn't somebody do this for me? I know that people have tried in the past, and it's just, it hasn't worked out for whatever reason, but I don't want to give up on that, because our kids deserve the best, but the future kids deserve the best too. And if that's what we can do, and at the same time set a good example for our kids to say, you know, look, this is what we're doing for our community, because our community is important. And I also think that Brian had made some good points. I don't think it was a couple of meetings ago or even last year about your real estate values. You know, we have great schools, but they're starting to need this work. I'm not starting, they do need this work. And people want to move to Amherst. It's a great town. So we need to keep those schools up to where our expectations are and where people who are moving here, their expectations are.
All right. Thank you, Christine. Shannon.
I just wanted to Tom mentioned the class size targets, Tom. I think, and I just wanted to get some clarification because I'm pretty sure that they're working under the class size targets that were set by the board for these buildings. So are you?
I haven't looked at the numbers, Shannon, to be honest with you. Off the top of my head, I don't remember because I can't find them in my email. I'm just looking at the overall enrollment numbers and dividing those up, you know, the numbers that we're expected to have by 2025 based on the number of classrooms we have. Do we need to have 9 classrooms? Is it from 15 to 17 kids or is it from 15 to 20 kids? So it's just basically something we need to look at because it's not the only consideration for the building costs. There are, you know, bodies and supplies and all that stuff that's going to be added onto it that'll continually be in the budget even after the school itself is paid off. So it was more just not forgetting that aspect of it as opposed to having numbers. I just don't have the numbers in front of me to look at them. So.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Really good discussion so far. Are there any other comments? No. Okay. So I think trying to decide if we talk a little more deeply about this or move on to AMS and then go back into other thoughts and how we're gonna move forward.
This is Lance. I would suggest let's look at AMS and then let's talk about subcommittees. It sounds like the group would like somebody to focus on refining the estimates for each school, as well as refining the schedules and refining double checking the class size. That would almost be another committee if you want to reconsider the programming, essentially, sizing of the schools. So why don't we take a look at AMS and we can talk about them all together. I don't know if they'll be the same subcommittee to look at both, but my guess is it would be that we want some consistency across buildings.
Yeah, I think that's fine. Adam, did you want to make a comment first before we move to AMS?
Yeah, maybe if I could. I want to talk a little bit about bond financing and how it works and give some perspective on these big numbers. Do you want me to do that now or do you want to wait until after the AMS piece? I'm seeing everyone's reaction to big numbers and I'm afraid that we're going to tune out the AMS piece and just be wondering about our tax bills. So
yeah, I would suggest we go with the tutorial first.
Okay. So I'll share my screen and this is a bond calculator. And you'll see here that it has at the top the cost of the project, the valuation in town, which is the all of the value of homes and throughout the town, and the length of bond years, how many years we'll pay back the bonds, and then an interest rate assumption. Down below here, this shows all of the payments each fiscal year going forward. Some things that are unique about municipal bonds is it's not like a mortgage where we make the same payment every year. We make the highest payment at the beginning, typically the second year that the bonds are on the books, and then the cost goes down every year. And so this chart to the right shows a typical amortization schedule for a bond repayment schedule. It shows first year you make an interest-only payment, then you have your highest year, and it goes all the way down during the life of your bonds. And on this chart, I also include the estimated tax rate impact and the tax bill for a $350,000 home. And so you can see with the assumptions I made, the high water mark is about $1,000 a year for a $350,000 home with about a $3 tax impact. And it goes all the way down in the last year to $1.74 and $610. But I want to provide some perspective on all of this. So first, the interest rates are very important, right? This assumes a 3% municipal bond interest rate. But I happen to know that the New Hampshire Municipal Bond Bank just did a refunding of their existing debt. And there you can see their rates are embedded in this email where they had 1.97 for 25-year bonds. I should note, when you sell bonds, you're not selling one bond. You're actually selling a bond for each year of this repayment schedule. So it's actually 25 separate bonds that are being sold. And they will likely have different interest rates. And so if you look in this, what the New Hampshire Municipal Bond Bank did, theirs were 0.57% interest for their 5-year period, 0.86% interest for 10 years, and up to 1.97%. And so I assume 3% through the whole time, which is very high. If we even reduce this to an average of 2% throughout the whole time, you can see it knocks almost $1 million off the total payment at the high water mark and over $100 for an average home. Okay, so first of all, the interest rates that we're assuming right now are on the high side, to be cautious. The other thing to keep in mind is that the $5 million mark, well, that's high. If you think about it, we're spending about $1 million a year for our capital maintenance plan, which we've started funding last year. That's going to be about $1 million a year, most of which, not all of which, but most of which will be knocked out if we move forward with these projects, right? So right off the bat, you can see how those things interact with one another and get a scale for what we're talking about. And then for those of you who are doing math in your head, by adding 73 million to the 40 or so million for AMS, plus the 30 or so million for the Sauhegan 2.0 project, you're probably thinking that if that all happened at the same time, this would be a massive tax impact. And I don't think anyone's planning on doing that. It's not my decision, but I'm going to suggest that's probably not the case. And so instead, what we can think about is, what is the high water mark for the town? What do we want to be the absolute high tax impact, and find a way to build a debt schedule that keeps it at that high water mark over the course of the next 30 or 40 years, and then schedule our projects to be done when they can fit into that debt schedule, so that we don't have going up and then going down on the tax impact. We have more of a consistent tax impact over time. All this to say, it isn't as bad as it might seem from the get-go when you see these big numbers and think about a tax impact. The truth is, we're not paying anything for our capital facilities right now. We have almost all of our debt paid off, and we're not making any payments towards our long-term capital facilities. And so when you look at our neighboring towns, you can see that they're all doing that in some form or fashion. They're paying off their major facilities. But just to give some perspective on something that was said earlier, Campbell High School was built around the year 2000, 2001. And if I remember right, it was, and I think it was a Harvey project, but I can't remember that for sure. I'm sorry, it was a Hutter project, but I think it was 13 or $14 million. Wyndham High School, Lance, was what, 51 million all in?
Yes.
About 2 million square feet. And Bedford High School up the road, I believe, was 30 something million. And so I do want to share that perspective that the cost of construction goes up pretty significantly with time. And so some of this has to be kept in perspective of what will those costs be with time. So I went fast because I didn't want to, we need to spend more time going over this. But I think if we think about it, like, we need to think about what the annual investment ought to be for facilities, figure out what that amount is, and then build a debt schedule and a project timeline that fits under that high watermark, we're going to be just fine. All right. That's my perspective.
Thanks, Adam. Any questions for Adam before we move to AMS? Go ahead, Brian.
I raised my hand this time.
You did.
So Adam, what might be helpful is to kind of show residents what we've already projected to pay out if we do nothing, and what the tax basis would be, as you just laid out, those $350,000 baseline house. And then if we put a debt schedule in place for funding these projects in a sequenced order, what the differential might be. Because I think that's a really compelling story to show people how much you're going to pay for just what we have today and to maintain it versus how much you will pay for something that's new. I think that will really help people better understand the investment objectives of what we're trying to set out to do here.
Great. Hey, Lisa.
Hi, I don't know if this is appropriate for right now. Adam, you were talking about and showed us the numbers just for Wilkins and said the other ones, yeah, look at $150 million for 3 schools. We can't do. But there are projects at, say, Sauhegan that really need to be done well before the next 10 years when Sauhegan finally gets their turn. So I think we need to be thinking about how some of these projects need to be added into that amount. I don't think looking at only one school, one step at a time, like a domino at a time, is really maybe what's in best interest.
I think that's
do you want to address that? I know we discussed that.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm saying, Lisa, is that instead of looking at one project in isolation,
okay,
or all 3 projects as one big pill to swallow, instead we should look at it as what is the amount on an annual basis the town is willing to invest in
right.
school construction, and then back into a schedule that fits within that amount. That's what I'm trying to say, is instead of...
Okay, I understand. I misunderstood. I was thinking of it as packages rather than lots of little things that create one. Okay, I got it. Thank you.
John D'Angelo.
Yeah, I'd faded for a while there and just, revived myself a little later. Looking at the cost numbers, you're talking between $4 and $5 million a year for 25 years, basically. And that's just for this one. On the other hand, there is a argument to be made that without a first-class school system, Amherst is not a particularly attractive place to come. Yes, we have the Village Green and we have lots of other things, but people don't come here for that. They come here for the schools. So there's a protect the value of your home argument that needs to be part of the selling process. I think Adam's note that there's almost $1 million worth of capital spending just for maintenance of the existing facilities, a lot of which is Wilkins and Clark, that would go away or at least be vastly reduced, is also part of the package. But I think his approach is probably correct. Let's figure out what is the maximum the town can possibly bear, and then figure out what you can get for schools and sequence the projects as you need them. But I mean, protecting the value of the homeowners' properties is part of the selling message. And if we allow the schools to deteriorate to the point where they are falling down, then we are not a viable destination community, and the people that are already here are not going to be very happy paying pretty high taxes for very inferior product.
Thank you, John. Great comment. All right. I'm not seeing any other hands. So Lance, would you move on to AMS, and then we'll regroup after that?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So AMS, again, this is a total project estimate. Similar to the other project, we made assumptions of quality of construction matching AMS, and we did make similar decisions throughout. AMS also did include renovations. A lot of systems that need to be replaced now, even if you were to do nothing, are all included in Harvey's number and could easily be teased out. Overall, on the project, we had Harvey break their estimates down into these categories: general conditions to run the job. They did a phasing plan, which I'll share briefly here. I don't want anyone to get bogged down with month by month, but they did a phasing plan for renovating AMS, considering that it would be fully occupied the entire time, and came up with 30 months of construction. That gives them about a $2.5 million overhead operating cost to do the project. Site work is about $2 million. The addition, the new wing of space that essentially we're short and missing, is about $7.7 million. And the renovation itself, that is, taking out the triangle classrooms and creating proper size classrooms, proper sized and proper shaped, is about $21 million for a total construction cost of $33.5 million. With contingencies, all built in, same percentage of contingencies carried here, and admittedly high at this point, it comes to about a $42 million project. The phasing plan. Give me just a moment to pull that up. Sorry, I'm having a difficult time opening the phasing plan. I'll try to reshare here. Here's a phasing plan that Harvey had worked out. Essentially, it's 6 phases of construction. Many of these phases do overlap if you look at the dates. It had us starting that first phase in April of 2022. I think this project in particular, I know if we wanted to be more aggressive on the schedule, we could easily fast track the bid packages to get to start work sooner. But they assumed at that point that they would just start in April 2022. They went through 6 different phases. We assumed as part of this that we would not be able to give up, knowing our constraints for current population, we would not be able to give up more than 1 wing of classrooms at a time. That's really what drives that 30 months of construction is being fully occupied. I will note that Harvey, within their estimates as well, did make assumptions on portable classrooms. I'll turn it over to James to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so not knowing exactly how much space you guys can give up, we felt that it was prudent at this time to include some temporary classrooms, portable classrooms. As we get further along in the design, and if we can talk about swing space, yes, we will do the addition first, give us some swing space and hopefully move some kids in there first. But if you can give up another wing, we can attack it. We can phase it differently. But until we get further along, we felt comfortable enough that we needed to have some portable classrooms. We also carried some allowances for some abatement, shoring and underpinning for the new addition, and of course abatement for the existing school. Until we see the report and we get real numbers, we had to assume some costs for that scope.
Okay. So Roger has found some hazardous materials reports, and we'll get those in front of Harvey and we can refine those numbers. As far as the phasing goes, typically the phasing would be a committee, including the educators there, that would need to kind of look through that phasing and say, how can we operate this school at each phase to really refine that. So I would suggest a group, including the principal, to look at the phasing in detail.
All right, reactions, questions, comments? Can either use your real hand or a virtual. Oh, Brian, sorry, I can't see you. Go ahead.
Just from, as you said, from a phasing perspective and freeing up space, I mean, depending on the sequencing of projects, if we move forward with all 3 of them, if you did the elementary school first, and by moving the 5th grade back to the elementary school, you create capacity at the middle school. If we could even get creative with using the other buildings, because you'd also free up Clark, and you potentially could have some flex space in the annex. There might be an ability to flex some of the students in multiple sites to free up as much capacity as possible to address the middle school. You have to get creative and things might get sticky, but I mean, maybe only for 6 months or whatever that time period is, but it at least gives them enough space to move through and develop new space to then move the students back into.
I agree. The reason we didn't accommodate that on the this estimate is we weren't sure which sequence would happen, and we wanted this estimate to kind of stand on its own. But I absolutely agree, Brian. If we were to do Wilkins first, then we could use Wilkins for an entire grade level and allow us to save money on this one and save temporary construction. Not knowing which committee, which sequence that we were going to unfold, we wanted to make sure every estimating kind of stood on its own as a standalone project.
Yep. Victoria, did I see your hand?
I did. I am eager for us to break out into some subcommittees. Not saying that we need to do that now, but I think that a lot of us are sitting here looking at different things, and people probably have things that they're good at or they're interested in to be able to focus on, so that we can get these numbers to where we as residents can support them.
Yeah, I had, as we were all talking, I had 2 subcommittees in mind, and maybe there's others. So any further discussion on AMS before we move on to trying to figure out how we're going to move forward with next steps?
I just have a quick comment.
Sure.
I love the idea of breaking up into subcommittees. I think it's definitely time to do that. But I know that Clark Wilkins is a huge priority. I just don't want us to lose sight of there's a lot going on at AMS as well. So, you know, I know that Clark Wilkins, we've talked about it being a priority. Getting the 5th grade moved back down is huge in order, you know, to make things happen at AMS. But there's still, as anyone who watched the virtual tours that Brian and I led last spring, there's a lot going on at AMS. So I hope that we're able to, you know, to make that work and put that into the plans.
All right, so go ahead, Brian.
So you know my feelings on the middle school. I've been very vocal on how deplorable they are, hence this is what I feel like when I'm in the middle school. And Shannon, I totally agree that building needs help, lots. But I do think we need to be thoughtful in terms of the sequencing to do it the most cost-effective way possible. And just after the blush reaction to what the numbers are telling us, and you know, hearing James talk about freeing up capacity to address the middle school, the quickest and most cost-effective way off the back of an envelope is to do the elementary school first, move an entire class out, frees up capacity for the developers to go in and execute. So I think, you know, as we talk about bringing on the subcommittees and getting down to those line items of like what's an absolute and what's not, what's the nice to have, it's also about the sequencing of events. And you know, as we've heard both Adam and John talk about managing the tax basis and, you know, preparing people for the worst, hopefully scaling back as we roll through this, and clearly articulating that to you. I think the sequencing is critical in terms of you stitching all 3 of these projects together.
Absolutely. I don't disagree with anything that you just said. I guess my point is that I don't want it to lose it in the mix, right? To get over one hurdle and then kind of be like, okay, we're good, right? Like I want to make sure we have that long range plan that we're talking about bringing forward. That is our mission as a committee. So that's all. Yeah,
no, I totally agree. And for me personally, whether my kids use it or not, I don't know. They probably never will. I don't really care. This is the right thing to do for the community, and we have failed to execute against it for a duration of time. And I think John has eloquently said, property values will be impacted if we don't make material changes. And I said earlier, you ain't going to get a better time on a rate for these types of bond issuances. So we're in a crosshairs. If you want to do it right, this is our best opportunity. Otherwise, whatever we do, we're either going to be dissatisfied with or we're going to be paying more for it.
All right, so I'll just say a couple things before we chat about which subcommittees would make the most sense. But yes, I think our mission is to look at this over the long term, 25, 30 years, and look at all of the facilities, all of the school facilities that we have in our purview, and not put any to the side to be ignored. Certainly the work is going to have to be sequenced and staged appropriately. So we're going to have to dig in and figure that out and figure out what makes the most sense and what is going to be palatable for the taxpayer, because ultimately it needs to be voted in by the citizens in our community. So we have to balance that. I'm not saying we need to be afraid and be defeated, but we also have to be realistic and look at what is going to make the most sense going forward. So with that said, I think I completely agree that we need to get down to some details and set up some subcommittees to look at both the scope of the work, as Roger suggested, and I would certainly expect him to be on that subcommittee along with some other folks. Sorry if I'm volunteering you. And also a committee to look at the really the data and the numbers and take a stab at sequencing. We didn't talk about Sohegan, but remember that the Sohegan board wants to take a look at replacing the HVAC system, so that project needs to come into the conversation. I would also suggest perhaps looking at HVAC as a priority. Whether, I'm not sure when AMS would be done, but I would say that HVAC would certainly be a priority to be looked at in the shorter term as an option. So I think I've outlined 2 subcommittees that would make sense. If there are others, chime in. John?
I highly recommend a PR committee.
Yes.
You need to put it all together in a nice package so you can present it to some school boards, coffees, Rotary, anywhere that people are going to vote on it so they can understand it. And then you can present that to the voters also.
Yes, and I'm really hoping that Shannon's PR subcommittee will continue in that capacity. So hoping that that effort will continue. So does that make sense to folks? Am I missing anything? That sound okay? Okay. Go ahead, Brian.
Maybe I'm just slow on the uptake. I've been looking at Zoom too much today. What were the 2 subcommittees and what were the disciplines?
So I'm basically looking at the scope of work that's being proposed. So, you know, certainly what Roger was talking about, digging into the details, seeing, you know, if what is being proposed makes sense, if there are things that can be swapped out and whatnot. He really has a lot of the knowledge of the facilities, I think, to be able to lead that. So how does that sound, Roger?
He's running away.
Did you hear my Jeep peel out?
Right.
I'm fine with that. That's awesome. I think it's part of administration as well, part of this committee. I think it's a collaboration of all parties.
Yeah, great. So I guess we'll take some volunteers to work with Roger. You can either let me know now.
We have a data committee.
We do.
Is this something they can take on instead of spreading the group a little thinner?
Well, yeah, I would say the data committee would really be the second committee that I was talking about, taking a look at, you know, how we're going to make all the numbers work and what the impact is going to be, and, you know, the staging of the projects. So, and I know, Brian, you were on the data subcommittee and we didn't have a whole lot of data to deal with earlier. So I'm not sure if that's something you would like to be involved with.
Yeah, I'm happy to do it.
Okay, Great. And I saw Pim's hand up, so I'm hoping he's going to volunteer for something as well.
No, I was actually going to ask a question, but nice try. But I think you just answered it, and that is kind of what Adam said earlier, is if we can essentially level load the tax impact.
Yeah.
What is that threshold? And then, based on, I think it's what you said in the data subcommittee, what are the projects that would fall in line to maintain that tax impact? So,
yep.
That's part of that work, I'm assuming?
Yes.
Okay.
Definitely. Yep.
Yeah. So that's where I was going with that. And I'm not volunteering for anything yet.
That's fine. All right. Well, we have our two chairs. We have Brian and Roger. So if folks aren't comfortable volunteering now, that's fine. Or if they are, that's great. Or you can just shoot me oh, I see John's hand up.
Amy,
I know which one you're going to go to.
which one?
You're going to be with Roger.
That's for one, and then I'd like to be on the PR for two.
Okay, great. So Shannon is chairing PR.
Okay.
So that's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So you guys will add whoever volunteers to your email list. And Brian, I'll be on your committee, your subcommittee as well. And I think Adam needs to be on that as well.
Seeing as he has most of the data, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, if there's maybe a couple other folks who want to work with Roger, I think that would be great. So you can just shoot me an email after. Okay.
Amy, can I ask, maybe it's a question of Lance?
Yeah, sure.
So as you have, or maybe it's to James, you have that very nicely itemized list. Is it possible to maybe accelerate the process to say, hey, here's like, you need to do this. This isn't like a nice to have, like by code, it's required, you have to do it, versus like, these are the things that are like, yeah, they're kind of nice to have, but you really should have them. And then like, these are the glitzy pieces that you really should take a hard look at. I think if you had that level of detail, it should accelerate what Roger's setting out to do to make us move a little bit quicker. Because I mean, I know when people, when you say sticker shock about the timeline, you're talking potentially an opening a building in 2025. We've been talking about this for 2 years and we're just talking. These poor folks actually have to build something. So anything we can do to accelerate it would be helpful.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I think, what you're talking about is what we normally, what we're talking about is normally a VE list, of value engineering list, basically a list of things that we think you could save money on, that you would have a choice on. If we schedule a meeting with Roger and that subcommittee, we could show up to that committee with a list of our own. I would ask Harvey to create one, I will create one, and I would invite anybody else that's on this committee to review and show up with a list, and that will speed that process up. While we're together, we can also cooperate on what else should be considered. Things, some really easy things like if you went to a cheaper flooring material, how much would you save, and how much would you, what's the payback? But we can be prepared for any subcommittee meeting by generating those lists in advance, along with everybody else, and then as a committee we can discuss pros and cons of each item of cost savings.
Okay.
And Lance, when you say how much you would save, really the other side of it is how much does it cost to maintain? As I think Roger called out, like something like a skylight, nice to have, maybe it reduces the amount of non-ambient light that you need, but they may be more expensive to maintain versus the flooring tile that you talked about. Sounds like, yes, it's more expensive, but the upfront cost is less expensive than the long-term cost of the maintenance with the other materials. So I think having that level of detail would be helpful to make the best choices, not only for the short term, but for the long term.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. Thank you, Lance.
Okay. That's great. I feel like we have a plan. In terms of timing, I know we have our next meeting in 2 weeks. So we're going to have to work quickly if the subcommittees can get together and do their work in time for that next meeting, then that gives us a couple of weeks to really refine what our recommendations are going to be for the boards and their meetings at the end of the month. So does that sound reasonable? Okay. Adam, am I missing anything? Any other comments you want to make?
No, this is great.
Okay.
Can I ask a question, Amy?
Yeah, go ahead.
Our next meeting is scheduled for October 15th.
Yep.
It looks like it's at the same time, if I'm looking at the calendar correctly, as Mount Vernon's school board meeting. So I just didn't know if Adam being part of the data subcommittee, like if that's going to be a conflict, or, you know, if that's something we need to think about.
Yes, it is, Adam. You've double booked yourself.
What date? I'm sorry.
Thursday, October 15th. I don't know if, you know, if our committee is amenable to maybe even just, you know, shifting the time on that date, if that was a day that worked for everybody, or.
Is that Thursday?
It is.
Mount Vernon board meeting, that's right.
Okay. Can we do the Wednesday? Oh, no, that's Amherst board meeting, right? On the 14th.
Like, you know, do we need a full 2 hours, do we think? Can we start earlier on that same night, since that night was already on folks' calendar? Sorry, I'm not trying to throw a wrench in it, but
no, it's a
good
good
hash
point.
it out now.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how much you're going to have in terms of updates in 2 weeks with 2 subcommittees that have been formed about 5 minutes ago. So it could just be a truncated meeting, or you could just move it to an earlier time if that works.
Well, and Sauhegan 2.0 is presenting that night as well. So we will need time for that. They've been working for a while now. Victoria, you had your hand up, right?
That's what I was going to say.
Right, okay.
John, go ahead.
For what it's worth, Wednesdays work better for me than Thursdays. How about trying for kicking it out 6 days to the 21st?
Yep. How does that work for folks?
I don't know if this impacts anyone here. It says Amherst Budget Subcommittee meeting. Is that just a Ways and Means Subcommittee? Is that okay?
Probably, yeah.
Okay, so Victoria, you wouldn't be able to make that one.
It's at 7:30 in the morning.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I'm looking at the AM. Oh, gosh. Thanks, Stephanie.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I think that makes sense.
21st.
Gives an extra week for something to get done.
Yeah, I think that's good.
That fit your schedule, Adam?
I could only do an hour from 6 to 7. I have a planning board meeting at 7.
Okay, we'll have your group go first.
I'm sorry, what date is that? I'm swimming in dates right now.
I think it's
21.
21.
October 21st, I'm wide open.
Okay.
Not anymore.
All right, and then in the meantime, oh, Ellen.
Sorry, Amy. Does that mean we're canceling the 15th?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then 2.0 is now presenting on the 21st. Is that okay?
All right, and then if folks are okay in the meantime, I had talked to Shannon about just getting together and starting to build out a template for board presentations, just to, you know, we don't have all the information, but at least starting to think about having that ready to go, and what type of information we want to make sure we cover. So broad topics. So as long as everyone's okay with us doing that work behind the scenes, we're going to go ahead and do that in the meantime. All right. Cool. All right. So thank you to James and Lance and Anne for a lot of work that I know has gone into those cost estimates, and appreciate it. And I think we're cautiously optimistic moving forward. We have a lot of work to do, but we're really excited to keep this process moving. I know, as Victoria said and others have said, you know, this committee was formed for a very good reason. We need to keep that mission in mind as we move forward. So I thank everyone for a lot of hours and thought that has gone into this so far. And I know that we appreciate it on the boards and the SAU, and hopefully our community will appreciate it as well. So unless there's anything else, don't see anyone with their hand raised. I'm going to go ahead and adjourn the meeting. And Adam, you'll send out the invites?
I will. Yep.
Okay, great. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Good night, everyone.